Good afternoon and welcome back to another edition of, we're waiting to unveil this. I watched a lot of Saturday Night Live reruns this last weekend. Wayne's World came to mind, Between Two Ferns. Also got thinking about, what's that other one? What's Up With That, Sam? That's a good one for you. But anyway, in all seriousness, we're glad to have a second chance at this. We're going to keep working on that name. But in the meantime, the more serious topics of the day, and this is a serious one. Dean Smith dying late Saturday night, Blair. I mean, we'd all known, I guess, for some time that he'd faded from public view because of his illness, but you had a sense of him for almost all your life from growing up in Carolina.
Right, I grew up in North Carolina and or moved there when I was pretty young. And in the late 60s, he was just really getting going there. Charlie Scott had just arrived, the first African-American scholarship athlete at North Carolina. And then growing up there in the 1970s, program was rolling, and of course the Michael Jordan years of the early 80s, and his first national championship in '82. I was living in that part of the country at the time, and no, he really is. He's an incredible figure. I think of him as one of the, I would say on the Mount Rushmore of college basketball coaches. He's there, maybe along with John Wooden and Mike Krzyzewski, Bob Knight. I think those might be, at least as we speak now, the four greatest college basketball coaches of the modern era. But something else, we talked about this a second ago. I didn't know him very well, but I did know him enough to ask him to write a foreword to a book that I wrote about Fog Allen, and lo and behold, he accepted the offer. And I remember sitting in his office for about 45 minutes and talking to him about Fog Allen. He wanted to talk a lot about Dick Harp. Dick Harp, of course, was the Fog's assistant, and he had a close relationship with Dick Harp. But it was a fascinating time because he wanted to talk about me, and he wanted to know about my background, and I'll never forget that. 45 minutes in the office with Dean Smith, and it was a memorable time.
By the way, that seems to be something that comes up a lot with him, is how little he wanted to talk about himself. It always was sort of pushed back on others, and I think those who are cynical sort of called that a false humility, but I don't gather that. I think that was always really his way.
Very genuine. I do think he was genuine to the end, and look, this will be part. Everything you've heard or you wrote or you've read about him in the last couple of days, it's all true. You had a great column about his life in Kansas and in Topeka, especially. I thought that was a wonderful column. Look, North Carolina's embroiled in a little bit of an academic not a little bit, but possibly big academic scandal, and it actually dates back to when he was, the head coach there in the 90s. So I'm not saying the final chapter is not written yet, but what we know about his career, the legacy of Dean Smith, it's just phenomenal.
Well, it's something we should revisit this sometime too, about how he sort of straddles the KU and UNC programs and is the linchpin of all that. But just to switch gears a little bit, we were talking a little bit about Missouri. Missouri was a topic for us a little bit last week, but now the Tigers have lost their 9th in a row. That's the longest losing streak since the Bob Van Atta years, which were in the mid-'60s. And I hate to say no sign of relief in sight, but they're on the road tomorrow, and I don't think that's an automatic win. I got a lot of email from stuff. Blair and I both wrote stuff for Sunday. I think Blair probably heard from people too about actually, surprisingly, people sort of standing up for Kim and thinking you have to understand the season as a mulligan. I got some dissenting email that see it as an embarrassment to the program and even saying the hire was bad. But what's the 30,000-foot view on this, and how do you see it right now?
I kind of think that both of those things can be true in some ways. It is embarrassing to have a run like this, but at the same time, this was always going to be a bad year. I mean, that team, they don't have much talent. It's not Kim's team. There was a reason that Frank Haith got out when he got out. But if they can come out of the year with some sort of semblance of discipline and something that we're not going to lower the standards just because we're losing games, that the suspensions are still going to happen. He's still going to get on these kids and try and improve the deal, with next month, next year, 2 years from now in mind more than the next game. And I think that can be an important trait. And, you know, who knows? Like, none of us can sit here and say for sure whether Kim's going to succeed or fail there, right? But if you're going to succeed there and take over a team that doesn't have much talent, I think this is the way you have to do it.
I tend to think that way too, and somebody accused me of having blind faith in Kim, and I told him I'd like to think of it as sort of informed faith, but the truth is we won't know how this is going to work out for a couple of years. All you know is kind of the baseline of how Kim operates and who he is, and to that point, Blair, we were, I think, part of a pretty interesting post-game discussion, and a lot of it revolved around, I think this number's correct, 9 players having been disciplined under Kim, including 2 who are no longer there. That's more than they've got victories right now. And from what little our radar has picked up about most of these suspensions, they're not heinous things that maybe the coach had to suspend them for. Right. Or maybe the other coaches wouldn't have. We're not sure of that, just to clarify. But I do think that speaks to this whole point, what Kim is trying to establish.
And that's why his post-game press conference on Saturday lasted about 15 or 20 minutes, much longer than the typical post-game news conference. He explained a lot of that and defended his program and defended the way he's trying to conduct business. You know, the accountability for the players. And you're right, we don't know what the reasons are for the suspensions, but I think we have a pretty good idea that they're not major, there are no crimes involved,
right.
They're just, you know, they're just things that Kim wants to clean up in the program, but they don't help Missouri on the floor when Gil Caesar and Isabel and Naaman Wright are not available to them. Saturday against they had to start the 3 guards that were available.
Right.
All 3 guards that were available to Missouri started on Saturday. And it did help against Texas A&M. They had 8 scholarship players. So I think if you're a Missouri fan, what you want to see is this team show some competitiveness down the stretch in these last few games, because it'll be the last few games of Missouri's season. They're not going anywhere in the postseason. Just show some competitiveness, show some heart, some character, and I think that would go a long way to maybe changing the feeling a little bit about this season.
And maybe just to wrap things up as we try to learn our parameters on the time frame for tolerance of this show, another team suffering a little bit right now, both from suspensions as well as just on the court, is the Wildcats, and you've had some definite thoughts about them.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is a Mizzou fan could look at the football recruiting class if they want some relief. But yeah, I mean, at K-State, it's such a strange year. I mean, I'm sure stuff like this happens, you know, every once in a while at different programs, but, you know, to have such a rotten non-con, the Texas Southern game will never, you know, that will be part of, you know, the first paragraph of this season no matter what. And then, you know, they show some life, and now they've fallen back again, and, you know, Marcus Foster in particular suspended for a few games. And it really, it comes at a terrible time, you know, for that program in general, and Bruce Weber in particular, you know, a guy that was getting close, I think, to winning over sort of a skeptical fan base. And now, you know, to take a step back like this, when you have a player like Marcus Foster, that, you know, those years with a guy like that are precious. And to throw one of them away, you know, is going to be a bad mark and set them back a little bit.
Well, we'll come back with another edition next week. As always, if you've made it this far, thank you. And looking forward to doing it again sometime.